Name is Stanley Adlis from Stanley, Minnesota. Graduated from high school in 1968. Enlisted in the Navy in 1970 after I got my draft notice to become a Marine.
To become a Marine? You got a draft notice that said you'd be a Marine?
That was an incentive. Did basic training in Great Lakes, Illinois. And from there, I went to Providence, Rhode Island for it.
How did you get the basic training?
We took a bus to Fargo, and then from Fargo we flew to the cities and then to Chicago. Then the bus to the base.
Pretty nice little ride up to Great Lakes, is it?
Well, first time ever on a plane.
Yeah,
So you just gotta hang on and hope.
you're right.
But after basic, I got guaranteed an A school when I enlisted. And I went to Quartermaster school in Providence, Rhode Island.
Let's go back to basic training. Let me kind of, I was never in the Navy, just kind of go over what you went through in the Navy.
Well, basic training was a lot of marching and drilling, discipline mostly, and a lot of weird hours, standing watch and stuff, go out and guard, walk along the railing and the fences and see that nobody intruded. Well, there was nobody wanted to get in, most of them wanted to get out.
So did you do a lot of fire stuff, or
We did,
that's pretty big in the Navy, fighting fires of
we
on
did,
a ship?
like with the gas masks in the fire deal, you went in like a building, and you went in with your gas mask and you sit there, and then they let the gas out, and then they told you in a little bit, put your masks on. When you get them on, when we'll go out. But that was just once. And even the firefighting, some people got to run the hose, most of them didn't. They had like a fire in the same building and they'd go out and put it out. But it was kind of limited, because it was limited time and there was so many people training at the same time. Because
Okay.
in the company I was in, I think there was like 225 people. And there was maybe 10 companies there at the same time, and they just kept rotating in. They'd graduate about every month, and another bunch would come in. So you just kept rolling and turning over and gone.
Pretty impressive graduation though, isn't it?
It was unbelievable. It was July, about 100 above out, and you march as the company, all in order. You go by the commanding officer, he's sitting up on a podium, and everybody goes face right, like a salute. Then you go around the big field of grass, and you get in your spot, and everybody faces forward facing the commander, and then they have a bunch of speeches, and pretty soon everybody is done. But it took about an hour and a half. There was a lot of people that passed out.
My daughter graduated from there, so I was able to see it. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah. Was she in blues or whites when she graduated?
Whites.
Whites, yeah. That's way more impressive than the blues.
Yeah.
Blues with the neckerchief.
So you got done with graduation. Where'd you go from there?
I came home for a week, back to Stanley. Then I went to the cities, and I flew to Providence, Rhode Island for A school at Quartermaster rate for 8 weeks.
So you're in supply.
No, navigation,
Quartermaster navigation.
yes.
Well, that doesn't sound right.
Well,
Quartermaster.
yeah, but Navy's different from the Army and stuff.
Okay. Yeah,
'Cause there was-
obviously.
There was yeomen and the other ones in different billets, different ratings. We had electricians, radiomen, lots of bosun mates, divers, signalmen. Lots of people on board. About when we finally got on the ship, there was about 700 and some most of the time.
Can I ask you a quick, go back to basic training? Did you learn how to tie knots and all that stuff?
Some, not much. We learned more after a person was on the ship.
Okay.
We
Right.
did, like they had fancy chairs like this with the round deals, and we braided the braids on them with about a 1/4-inch white rope. And then we shellacked them so that's how they stayed. Took many, many feet to do a chair, and
Yeah.
patience.
Yeah, I would.
You had to have the bead come out just right on top. And there was 2 captain's chairs, like one for the captain and one for the executive officer in the pilot house.
Good. So, quartermaster, what did you do? What did you train for? What trained to do?
Mostly chart work in navigation from one port to the next port. You lay out routes, and then you had every 4 hours you had a DR, dead reckoning point. And if you got out of the 4-hour pattern, you had to resubmit it all again. And it wasn't bad until you crossed the date line. Then you had one day twice and you lost one the other way.
Kind of mess you up, huh?
Well, most people couldn't do it.
You did?
Yeah. Yeah, I went on 3 cruises to the Far East. 3 different times I was there. The last time, it's kind of getting ahead of itself, but the different places we went when we were over there, we were stationed out of Sasebo, Japan. And we went to different points south and north of there. We went to Taiwan, Okinawa, Philippines, Vietnam, Hong Kong, China. We went north just about to South Korea, right next to shore the one time. And we did a lot of water traveling.
Water traveling?
Yeah, on the water.
Oh, were you on the same ship?
I was on that ship for 3.5 years,
Really?
yes.
So where was your main port?
We were out of Long Beach, California.
And you come back there how often?
We were gone for about a year each trip.
Really?
We'd go overseas and we'd spend about 10 to 11 months there. Because a lot of times it took 10 to 15 days to get there, and each way.
So you get to a port in somewhere in Southeast Asia and
Well, we went to Sasebo, Japan, on the west side of Sasebo. It's maybe up a third of the way from the southern tip. And a lot of times we were just sitting in port there. And we had the 7th Fleet came aboard when we were there. So sometimes they went with when we went on the ocean, but most of the time they just stayed on shore on the base. They kind of went once in a while to say they'd been on the water. That was my opinion of it. It was Admiral and the 3 or 4 bar ones.
so your ship was what kind of ship? Was that a battleship or
It was a repair ship,
repair ship?
auxiliary repair. They could fix or make just about anything.
So they had machine shops and all that kind
They had
of
a
stuff?
machine shop that was maybe 250 feet long in the middle of the ship. And they had a foundry. They had divers. The electronic technicians did a lot of fixing on electronic stuff, radios and communication, radar. We had them on board, and we had the radio men, they just run the radios. And we had radar men. And we had radar up in the pilot house that we worked with for navigation. And we did a lot of, on the ocean when you got away from shore so far, we did a lot of celestial navigation. stars, the sun and the moon.
Yeah. So, you were in what years?
From 1970 to 1974.
Okay, so you were there during the Vietnam era.
Yeah,
And so you sailed in the waters of Vietnam?
yes.
Okay, South China Sea and,
The first time we went to Vung Tau on the south end of Vietnam, there a person went ashore. There's a big dock out. We anchored out on the ocean.
you did go ashore?
Yes, at Vung Tau. Not very far. Went to they had like a gedunk station on the end of the pier, so you went there and had something different to eat and had a beer and decided, well, that ain't worth drinking. It was formaldehyde, so it didn't get skunky. If you drank one or two, then it didn't make no difference. But the first about half it went pretty good when it was warm. Then the last half, well, no, that's enough of that. A lot of them went in and got half pickled. It was just like when they used to.
Is that what did that?
Well, that was part of it, but the beer didn't get stale then, supposedly. And the other times we went to Da Nang, Vietnam. That was up north on the east coast. There was a lot more action up there.
When you say action,
Fighting, planes going in and out, helicopters.
that was a main base, Air Force base, yeah.
Yes, and we'd go in the morning at 8 o'clock and anchor, and ships would come alongside and they'd repair on them and fix different stuff. At 5 o'clock in the evening, we'd go back out in the ocean and steam offshore about 10, 12 miles all night, and in the morning we'd be back in again and anchor in the
Go to a
spot.
safe zone.
Well,
Oh,
you couldn't stay in the harbor because there was sappers that come out even in the daytime. The one time when we were there, they had two whaleboats, about a 50-foot boats. They'd drive around and around the ship, change their courses and patterns and drop depth charges all the time. While we were there, they counted the ones that washed up on shore. There was 38 of them. One swimming out to put a dynamite or explosives on the bottom of the ship. And the one ship it was a merchant ship. They were at the dock. Well, they blew a hole in the bottom of that one, it sank.
And it sank it.
Well, it sank, so far because they maybe only had 8-10 feet
Okay.
of draft underneath. And when we were there, the one evening north of us, about 10, 12 miles, a destroyer went in to pick up a downed Air Force guy, a pilot. Well, they picked him up, and when they were coming out, they got hit by 2 missiles. But then the rest of the planes were there, and the ones that shot the plane, they didn't survive. But in the morning they came in, they were listing just about to the point of tipping over and sinking. They came alongside and they put the pumps in and pumped them out, and the welders went in and welded them up and patched. Got them leveled out, and 5 o'clock we went back out in the ocean. Next morning they came in, the same thing, but they were fairly level yet. So they welded some more. 3 days they welded, and then the ocean was pretty calm. So they went to the Philippines by himself, the USS Higbee. They went to dry dock there and patched them up. They went back to the States. There they really fixed them up, and then they came back and they steamed up and down the coast of Vietnam on the east side just to prove that the Vietnamese didn't sink the ship, because they figured it sunk, and they covered it up.
Propaganda.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the one time we were sitting anchored, it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the jets were coming off land from the west, going east and then going north or south, whichever way they were going. And it was a big disaster. This picture-taking plane, I'd call it, like a spotter plane, he come across in the pattern where the jet come, and they collided about mile and a half from us, 2 miles. Well, our whaleboats run over and picked up, the one guy lived, and the rest were pretty well gone. And it was a merchant ship sitting there, and they were armed, the plane. Supposedly they said the bomb fell. I seen it fall. It hit the merchant ship that was loaded with ammunition and explosives. The way it sounded, I don't know if it was true or not, but they said it went through about 3 decks and landed in the captain's quarters. And they were sitting there having lunch. Well, we left as quick as we could. We had like 3 boats on one side and 1 on the other, and they loosened the lines, and everybody took off and went out to the ocean because they were kind of scared that something might happen. But it didn't blow. And we went to the ocean. It was just a longer duration that night. Next morning we were back in. And usually when we went there, they went for like 40 to 45 days. We went in and out and anchored, in and out and anchored.
What was the food like, Stanley, on a ship?
Well, it varied pretty much. They had a pretty good supply most of the time. The one thing you didn't really want to eat, well, you get, when they come with the green scrambled eggs, that was too much. But they were dehydrated, and they mixed water, and sometimes they didn't they didn't distill the salt water enough so they had enough salt in there. They said that the eggs got greener with age, one of the two. So you don't eat scrambled eggs for quite a while. But we had a lot of seafood, lobster, shrimp. And the best was like, the breakfast was better when they fried the eggs, fresh eggs, because they'd bring on semi-loads of them when we were in port. Into the hold they went.
Okay. What's sleeping quarters like?
It was bunks, just a frame wrapped with like a cloth laced to the frame, and then they were anywhere from 4 to 6 high. Depends on how much space you had above you. Most of them were 4 where we were, and you could fold them up so they all folded. So it was all kinds of room to clean underneath. Most of the time it was pretty good. Sometimes it got pretty cold. When we were in Sasebo, Japan, the one Christmas it snowed. Well, they didn't really have a really good heating system on that old ship. You're either real warm or okay or cold. So a lot of times you'd stay in the pilot house or in the quartermaster's house up above. There we had kind of a heating thing you could regulate. You'd spend more time there than down in the bunk.
So did you have shifts? I mean, there had to be people.
Well, we had shifts, yeah. There was three shifts. Like if you were in port, you served your day, you had to stay on the ship. Then you get 2 days you could go ashore after work hours. And then get into whatever kind of trouble you got into or just go see stuff.
So when you were in port, did you stay in barracks or did you have a place off base?
We stayed right in the ship.
Stayed right on the ship?
Yep. Yeah, it had living quarters, the whole works.
Okay.
And while we were in Sasebo, a person took a bus tour, went to Hiroshima, where they had the atomic bomb.
Mm-hmm.
That was amazing. It showed all kinds of pictures of the not survivors and the survivors and the ones that maybe shouldn't have survived and did. It showed damage. It was like in a valley, and they dropped the bomb and it went off up in the air above, so
right.
It just washed out. They showed like trees that still were alive, that had damaged bark ripped off and branches ripped off. They had pictures, and they were still keeping them alive, like a bonsai tree or whatever they were.
They were still alive?
They were still alive, some of them.
70?
Yep. Well, they kind of made a big memorial out of the place.
Sure.
It took a while, but they did it. And usually after we went to Vietnam, then we went to Hong Kong, and 3 days we stayed there, so each division had a chance to get ashore. Each service unit.
So what'd your family think of you being in the service?
Well, the older brother went when I was still in high school, and I went next. Then the younger brother went. And then when I got home from the service in '74, the sister went into the Navy. 4 of us served. Well, it was either that option or go as a Marine, because I got the big brown envelope, greetings, with a green card in it.
I never heard that where they sent out selective service for Marines. I always heard where you were standing in a room and it did, you're going
Well,
in the Marines.
Welcome, you will be a Marine.
I'll be darned, I never heard of that.
Well, that's,
You always learn something from these
Yeah.
things.
that's the one I got, and I thought, no way. Because you know where you'd ended up, in the mud and
Yep.
rice paddies. It was easier to go ride the waves on the ship than that. And the one time when we left, the last cruise when we were overseas, I was the leading quartermaster. There was just 3 of us. There was supposed to be 8 from a chief down. I was 3rd class when we left the States. I made 2nd over there.
So you'd plot how you got to these different,
Yeah, dead reckoning.
Ports.
Dead reckoning. Every 4 hours you had your speed. You'd have the distance between each spot and just go the whole day.
pretty important job, isn't it?
Well, it was a TS secret one, because you had to look in your background so you could do it,
Yeah.
because they come and investigated. His mom, we'd
Oh.
right back and forth,
How long was your A school for that?
about 8 weeks.
8 weeks? Only 8 weeks? Okay.
Yeah, you learn quick, or most of the time you learn more on the ship than you did in A school, because they just hit the basics.
Basics, yeah. Fundamentals.
Yeah, you know, you plot out of the East Coast there out on the ocean and come back in, well, they never went more than 8 hours, 2 spots, and you went back. And the buoys, different ones in which way you were coming in and out, the colors, and what they stood for. But the last cruise, when we left Hong Kong, we went through the straits between China and Taiwan. We got about 300 miles north. Right at dinner time, or just before dinner, the bosun's mates were putting up the flagstaff on the back of on the stern of the ship. They'd taken it down and chipped it all out and repainted. Well, there was 4 of them holding on the rope. And when it went over center, they decided they couldn't hold it. They said, drop the rope. It had only dropped so far. The one guy didn't open his hands. He flew over the stern, and out in the water he went. Well, by the time we got noticed up on the bridge, it was maybe 5 to 8 minutes, maybe 10, because they just had headphones, and they talked on the headphones and said, man overboard. And I was up there on the bridge. Luckily, I just thought LAN, local apparent noon, with the sun for latitude, and the other quartermaster was on watch. So I told him, just write everything down. And by the time we were going along at about 15, 17 knots. Well, you just put your direction down, and I threw a big plotting sheet down on the chart desk with the mechanical arm for angles and different degrees, and started plotting. You had to slow down before you could turn. So we maybe went 8, 9 miles, I figured, before we got slowed down to turn around and come back. And there was a warrant officer to deck, fortunately. And I told him what to do, but he was in charge. We blew the whistle, the 3 blasts, and said, like, man overboard, and they run the flag up, the signalman, and we went we got slowed down and we turned and we're going back. And we had a course we were on, but when you're out on the ocean, it was absolutely smooth. There wasn't a ripple out there. We turned and went back, and I'm watching on the water and plotting. And I told him, steady as she goes, when it come around at the angle I wanted to go. And the guy steering, he leveled off on the course, and we went back maybe 7, 8 knots speed, not too fast, because he didn't want to get up speed and have to slow down again. And they had the whaleboat getting ready to go over the side to pick them up if we were lucky enough to find them. We were going back, and they had general quarters. All the people manned their battle stations.
We were looking for them, I suppose, huh?
They're on the wings. Passed out about 15 pairs of binoculars and big spotting scope, and they're all looking, and we're going back, and I said, he should be right off the port bow, about 2,000 yards. Just, estimating in your mind and speed and distance and time. They're all looking, they couldn't see nothing. I walked out on the wing. I said, there he is, about 10 degrees off the port bow. Non-qualified swimmer.
Non-qualified swimmer?
Yeah, well, the ocean.
Did he have a life jacket?
No. The ocean water, you float better in it with the salt. Well, I told the guy, you better stop. So we went all stop, and we coasted a little ways, and then he stopped, and we dropped the whaleboat out. And they ran out and picked them up and brought them back.
Still alive?
Still alive.
Non-swimmer.
Yep.
That guy's lucky.
Well, he was really lucky. We were going fast enough so that when he went over the back of the ship, it was a twin screw. The wake pushed him away from it instead of running him through. Well, needless to say, the captain, the XO, and everybody was up there. They were congratulating the officer of deck on what a good job he did.
You gave him the good job.
I gave him all the information, and he listened. Well, we got all done, everything calmed down. They retired from general quarters, and the captain went down, and the guy went down, and they cleaned him up and put fresh clothes on. He went and had breakfast or lunch with the captain and the XO. Because if we wouldn't have found him, we'd have had to spend 30 days there zigzagging back and forth looking for him. Everything got calm, and the warrant officer, he looked at me, he said, come on, I want to talk to you on the wing. I said, okay. I walked out. He shut the door. He looked at me. He goes, how did you figure out how to even get back there and find them? I said, it was all in your head. When you did time and distance and speed like that, it's there. Well, he said, I'm glad you were here because we'd have been still going someplace.
So how many years did you have in at that time? Was it pretty new, or?
That was the third cruise.
So you had some time
I had about
spotting.
3 years on the ship.
Okay.
I spent 3.5 years.
Good thing they had somebody with some experience.
Well, it was me and two other people.
Do you remember that kid's name?
I know it was started with a K.
That's another question. Did you know anybody while you were in the service from around here, or?
Yeah, my brother served on the same ship.
Served on the same ship?
Yeah, I got brother duty. He was electronic technician.
Okay.
He was the youngest chief. He made chief in the least amount of time in the whole fleet.
Like how many years?
7.
7 years they made chief.
Yep. That was like a record.
Wonder if he knows my daughter.
No,
That's about what it took her.
see,
Yeah.
he taught in Great Lakes a couple different times when he was on shore duty. And then he retired out. And at 55, he passed away.
Oh,
Just
really?
Whoop, all gone.
It's too bad.
Yeah. Just when, well, he went and served. He worked for the Saudis in electronic stuff, setting up communication systems and TV systems and all that good stuff they wanted, because there was no lack of money there for the oilmen and the
Right.
princes.
Did he die of cancer or
Heart attack.
heart attack?
Yeah, he weighed maybe 140 pounds and just poof.
Hmm.
That's what they said anyway.
So while you're in the Navy, Stanley, was there anything you'd have changed during your service?
A lot of things changed as it progressed. Most of the time it was pretty calm on the ship, but
Would you have done anything different? Would you like to have done anything different?
well, you were stuck in that option of either going or doing it. I was going to re-enlist, but then I got kind of ripped off a couple of times. And I
Because you didn't
decided,
get advancement or?
well, I didn't get the advancement. And then we got rowed up, we were on sea detail, the three of us. Well, you were supposed to change into the newer style uniform. You couldn't leave the bridge when you're on sea detail. So this officer wrote us up. So you got fined $25. I thought, well, that's okay. After that, my interest waned.
Yeah.
And when we were coming back, we were about halfway across. We were north of Hawaii, the last trip. We plotted out the chart and they sent it in, the track. And the radiomen were supposed to bring us any messages of anything vital for transportation. We were quite a ways north, not a whole ways, but we went through one of the missile areas where they shot missiles. We were going along, it was about an hour before daylight, and you see this streak go flying through the air about maybe 50 miles from you. And it goes to the water.
The missile goes in the water?
Yeah, they were practicing from Arizona or California in that area. They'd shoot them that far. Well, all of a sudden, the captain got this notice, what are you guys doing there? They're shooting missiles out there.
They're
What?
ballistic missiles then?
Well, yeah. I suppose it was 3,500 to 4,000 miles.
Well, that's unreal, isn't it?
Well, you could see him plain as day. Well, you didn't think nothing of it because we'd turned into the course, the route we were taking, and everything was approved. Then he got this notice, get out of that area, go this way and invade. So we went closer to Hawaii to get out where they were supposed to be dropping. We only seen a few of them drop, but could easily have been hit.
Oh yeah, that's kind of nuts.
Yeah, well, the captain came up, and I was on watch, and right away he started chewing. How come you didn't change course and everything? I said, we never got notified of this until I seen him up on the horizon. Oh, you seen him? Yeah. Well, from there he went to the radioman's room. They were behind us. And he chewed on them. How come he didn't send them that notice to change course?
They did get the notice.
The radioman got it, but they never brought it to us. After that, every message they got, they brought it up and we had to read it and sign it, even if it didn't pertain to us.
Changing orders.
Well, the captain got chewed, and when he gets chewed,
Yeah, everybody gets chewed.
It goes downhill awful fast.
Yeah.
But then we were coming in north of Long Beach, California, because you kind of go up and around because it's shorter instead of going straight across. So we were still going toward land, and people were betting when we were going to get land on radar. Well, they said, they looked at the chart, it's only about 80 miles from shore. I said, we'll get land on radar at 113 miles at this angle, at this time. That was about 20 seconds off. They goes, how can you get that distance? Well, I said, we aren't looking at the shoreline. We're looking at that mountaintop about 10 miles inland. The radar picks up over the horizon where you lose stuff. But we made it in. And then we sat in Long Beach for a few days. Then we went from Long Beach to Alameda, California by San Francisco. Went by Alcatraz about the fourth time. And earlier, during the World's Fair, we come in from the ocean into Seattle for the World's Fair. The Space Needle, we docked right out in front of it. But they had a procession of ships, like 26 of them were fully dressed, and then they manned the rails. They put flags from the bow to the stern, all the signalman flags, draped them all, and then they manned the rails in white.
Had to be pretty cool.
Yeah, a lot of work. 36 hours going in, sea detail. Didn't take us long to get out because we didn't have to time it going out to the ocean, but you didn't realize how bad it was getting in off the ocean there until you seen the charts. You kind of snuck between the reefs, different angles, and they had lights and used radar distance. But then I was just a third class quartermaster. Then there was 3, 4 above.
What was your rank?
I was third class then.
Third class.
And I made second class overseas, E5. But then they delayed giving it. And they said, well, you got to have a year left in service, left of service, before you can accept it. And I was like 9 days short. I gave them the second class stripe back. They said, you got to extend for 6 months to get it. I said, I'm not extending. Not now. I was about done.
For being so foolish and 9 days, yeah.
Yeah, and it was maybe $50 more a month, which was a lot of money then.
Right.
Because when we first come in, we were making $59 a month in basic. When we got overseas, it got all the way up to 69. Then when you made another rank, it got to be 74, and then you were up to like 83.
So when you got in Vietnam waters, did you get combat pay then?
Yes.
$65 a month, something like that?
No, it was like an extra $15 a month.
Was that all you got?
Yeah, $10 or $15 a month.
Should have been in the Army.
Well, no.
No.
No, I've seen more of the world than a lot of people ever will. Different countries.
Well, you did see a lot of the world,
Yeah.
So you had your 4 years, and where'd you muster out at?
At Alameda, California. Just right off the ship. You just signed the papers and walked off.
Okay, and walked off, and you come home then, or?
Yep. Yeah. Caught a cab and went to the airport and flew home standby. $55 from California to Minneapolis.
You had to pay for it?
Yeah. You got travel pay, but you paid, out of that money.
Oh, okay, all right,
But it was just enough to squeak by
right,
because they weren't generous.
right. So were you in uniform then, or?
No,
Okay,
because after about 71 or so, then you could travel in civilian clothes.
because they were giving everybody such a bad time going through the airports and stuff. Yeah.
Well, in San Francisco, they said if you walk around in uniform, they're going to come in and spit on you. I said, if somebody comes and spits on me, they're going to be picking up their teeth off the sidewalk.
Right,
What do you mean? I said, that's uncalled for.
right.
If they don't like it, they can go some other place.
Yep. So what'd you do when you got back?
Well, I farmed some, and then I worked at the elevator in Stranquist. And I farmed quite a bit later and quit working and raised a bunch of animals, mostly pigs, and raised calves up to 1,000, 1,200 pounds and sold them. And time flew away.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, faster and faster.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add about your military career, Stanley?
Well, the one trip, like a lot of people said, we never went anyplace. The one trip we went over 25,000 miles on water. we'd have went around the world at the equator, distance-wise.
It's a lot of miles.
Yeah, about 16, 17 miles an hour.
So how fast is a knot?
It's like 1 1/7 miles an hour.
1.7?
1 1/7. So if you get 7 knots, you're going 8 miles an hour.
Okay. All right.
It's like a fathom is 6 feet. Well, some places the depth deal didn't hardly get to the bottom. And the one time was really scary. We left the Philippines in a hurricane. And of course, it was towards dark. We went out and the radar was flat. You couldn't see, it was raining so hard. We had the general direction, you went so far, and then you turned. And the captain was running the speed, and he kicked up the speed, which was kind of foolish. We hit the waves in the dark. The ship rolled about 30 degrees, dived nose into the water, and the water come up over the top. It hit the pilot house, and the windows weren't really that watertight anymore. Some came in. We went down and rolled the other way, the same thing. The ship was just cracking and creaking and groaning. About the third time, he slowed down quick, or I think she'd have busted. It cracked the paint on the steel bulkheads. It flexed so much. And they had flex plates every so far on each deck to adjust to that. We had a wind speed meter up on the mast. It was a bird about, I call it a bird, that's what it looked like. It showed into the wind. It went up to like 130 knots. And we could read it in the chart in the pilot house. The cable broke. The winds were stronger than that. It spun that fast. Clink, no more wind speed.
Yeah.
We rode that one for like 2.5 days going to Da Nang. And then the storm caught up to it. The eye of the storm caught up to us. Got just as flat as the floor here in the room.
Really?
And then
Because you're in the eye, I suppose.
we were in the eye. The front went through, then the back came. Circle. Well, that was only about 1/3 as bad as the front. Just maybe 6, 8 foot waves. When we're in the front of it, the waves were about roughly 30 feet in the swells. Nobody was outside outside. You did all your traveling back and forth inside the ship. I thought we were going to be goners.
Yeah.
And
Well, it sounds like you had a pretty exciting,
and we did stop in Hawaii 3 different times and anchored beside Arizona, right east of it.
the old Arizona, sunken Arizona, yep.
Yeah, I got a deal from that one in the paper with the ship brochure, if you want to look at it afterwards. But otherwise, it was a lot of fun traveling, but once in a while you had tough luck.
Right, right. Well, Stanley, I want to thank you for doing this interview,
You're welcome.
and I want to thank you for your service.
Thank you also for doing it.